with the meeting this evening. So I do welcome you all. Thank you for your time this evening. We'll quickly run through the presentation. Today's presentation, brought to you by Electric Asset, is on electrical capacity for strata properties. When we will have about a 20-25 minute presentation, and then we will open it up to question and answers. And we will tonight we will cover topics about electrical capacity for EV charging and electrical planning report. So at this stage, I'm gonna hand it over to Jenny, who's gonna do some housekeeping stuff for us, and then we'll hand it over to Bruce, who will walk us through the presentation.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Just a little housekeeping for the presentation this evening. Please have your audio muted during the presentation. There will be time for questions at the end. Just remember to turn on your audio and then turn it off again after your questions. You can ask questions in the chat as well, and I can read those out to Bruce if the question hasn't been already answered. So yeah, now I'm gonna throw it to Bruce, who is our EV specialist.
Thank you very much, Jenny and Sanjay. Um, so yeah, tonight we're going to talk about electrical capacity, generally for condos and townhomes. So I'll get into it, and again, be time for questions at the end, more specific in nature. So when we look at this space for electrical capacity, essentially, when we look at the layout of a typical strata property, you have basically the grid. The utility or electrical grid, which winds around our province and region, it's either managed by BC Hydro, Fortis BC in the interior, or New West Power in New Westminster. So, regardless of the utility you're connected to, somewhere on the property, there's a main service, substation, or transformer that powers the entire site, and it's connected to the utility grid. And between the utility grid and this transformer, there's no meters, there's no monitors, there's nothing. Basically, a raw direct connection of high voltage wires. Now, when you get into the distribution of the building, you get into house distribution. So this is the kind of the common house power. So it's a metered. So the first metered service in the building. So there's a hydrometer. That's what normally Strata pays. And this house system usually runs everything like elevators and fans and motors and pumps and things like that, and all the common area lighting and stairwells and gates for your garage and things like that. So it's basically just seen as the house or common power type of distribution. The other distribution is called the meter center or meter stacks, where the power coming from your main transformer goes up into your residential meters. So if it's a high rise, maybe going up 20, 30 floors into the building, and the meters are either sometimes they're in the basement, sometimes they're on the throughout the floors, and sometimes they're in closets on each level of the building, depending on the size and design of the building. Also, below these meters, whether they're in the same room or a different room, inside the residential suites, there's electrical panels, and those panels provide power, and those are paid for by the owner of that suite, not by the Strata Corporation, and those panels are designed for each individual suite that they're powering. So if we look at control points, and this is what kind of comes into capacity, when we're looking at control points of a property, obviously the big control point is the main transformer, the main power connected to the grid. You don't want to overload this service, and you have a limited capacity, but a lot of buildings have a fair amount of capacity on their main transformer. The second one would be the house distribution. Those are usually designed. They could be anywhere from a couple hundred amps to 1,000 amp house distribution. But it's a separate distribution that has a finite amount of energy available. And then there's basically power going up to the meter stacks. That is, again, designed by engineers to fulfill the needs of all the residential units in the property. So again, we're looking at all three of these centers as control points or possible areas where capacity has to be taken into account. The idea being you want to protect your main transformer from not overheating or faulting, and you also want to make sure that you're not burdening the utility grid by overuse of the transformer. So we get into EV charging. Essentially what we do is we, by routine, we go to the existing house service and we try to see if there's available capacity on the existing house service. Now, one advantage with the house service is this is an existing meter. It has its own demand levels. So, throughout the day, it might peak and valleys of highs and lows of, but if there's adequate capacity, this is the ideal place to add EV charging. It's always already metered, it's always already paid for by strata, and we just kind of nestle it in there. However, if there's not adequate capacity on the house system, then what we have to do is we have to go back up to the main transformer of the building. And as long as there's available capacity here,
Bruce,
besides the resident.
can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
Sorry, I just got an email that there are people in the waiting room. Can you see them? And if you can let them in, that would be great. Sorry.
No problem. I didn't see anybody in the waiting room, but that's good. No problem there.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Yeah, no problem. So so we're back on capacity of the main service, and if there's capacity here, what needs to happen is we add a new meter, usually dedicated for EV charging, and then we put the EV distribution under a separate meter. So this provides, a second billing by hydro. It just covers all the EV distribution and charging that's going on in the building. And both work equally well, though the house system is preferable if there's adequate capacity on the house system. So this would generally apply, this layout would generally apply to condos and apartment buildings, and that have shared power, meaning strata pays for the power that's in the parkade. Again, this isn't for private residential homes or certain townhomes. And again, most of the buildings that have underground parkades would have all these features outlined in their property. So a little bit different would be very similar. A lot of times we say townhome properties are like lateral condo buildings. So instead of them going up, they go sideways. But they are different in a different way. But again, when we look at capacity and how things need to be controlled and the control points for a townhome, basically you have the grid, regardless of who it's connected to. But normally on the grid somewhere on the property, there's a main transformer. So it might be a PMT, like a pad mounted transformer. It might be an electrical room. It might be in a little metered closet. It might actually be hanging on the side of one of the townhomes itself. But essentially that is a power transformer that's designed to power multiple homes. Usually we see clusters of anywhere from 4 to 20 townhomes on one transformer or one main service, designed to meet the needs of all the townhomes. So under this scenario, there's obviously four meters feeding 4 townhomes, and again in the townhome there's a panel, and it's fed from a shared transformer. So the first control point would be the control point A, which would be the service room. So again, this transformer is supplying multiple buildings or multiple townhomes. And each townhome could be using different amounts of power at different periods of time. So that has to be taken into account. When somebody wants to put in an EV charger, obviously it's number one control point would be the panel itself. You got to consider, is there adequate space and room and capacity on the panel? But this becomes control point B, the electrical panel. So in a townhome, we have similar control points, but they're just laid out a little bit different. So again, in the townhome, one of the solutions, much like a residential condo, would be you put a metered service in. So you put an EMS controller. And what that does is it basically monitors the demand on that panel in real time. And it can control the charger and the level of charge that's going to the charger. So over time, or during the day, if there's peaks in the usage of all the electrical loads in the townhome, the EMS will throttle the charger down accordingly, and it'll make sure that electrical panel has never exceeded its recommended capacity. The other control point would be the service room or the EMS meter center controller. So again, same type of integrated EMS system, but what it's designed to do is monitor the main service on the property, and to make sure that that main service is not being overloaded by the cluster of townhomes that are powered by that service. Now, if we look at the propagation and the uptake of EV charging, you're looking at increased usage, increased electrical needs, and you're driving up the usage across the board on all the services. So the EMS meter center meter is capable of actually monitoring what each of the panel is doing in all the townhomes, and collectively what their impact is having on the centralized transformer. And this allows the EMS to react and tell the EV EMSs that are installed in the townhome whether or not they have to turn down the chargers, not necessarily because the townhome panels are being overloaded, but the main service might be overloaded. So through this device, you're considering all the safety features here. So again, the EMS, EV EMS controls at the townhome level, and the EMS meter center controller controls at the panel, but it also controls by monitoring the individual townhome panels as well. So again, keep an idea that the main safety factor is you don't want to overload the centralized power source for the cluster of townhomes. So if we talk about something that's directly thing, and we've seen this more and more as capacities being reached and things like heat pumps and converting from gas to electric become more popular, there's more and more strain on the electrical systems that are in existing buildings. So we look at energy management as the viable solution with peak demand and capacity controls. So first of all, with peak demand, if we look at how peak demand is managed in residential strata properties, is stratas in BC pay on two fronts. Number one, you pay a relatively low cost on the energy that is being consumed. So the blue line represents consumption of energy for charging vehicles, and you're paying generally around 11 cents a kilowatt hour, between 11 and 14 cents a kilowatt hour, relatively cheap. But as a strata property, you're also paying peak demand surcharges, and peak demand surcharges in BC right now are $13 a kilowatt. So if you notice, this blue line kind of varies throughout the day, and it hit a peak point. It might have hit it for maybe 15 minutes. And in BC, there's no time of day. There's no difference between when and how. It's what is your high water mark during a month. Whatever that highest point is, doesn't matter if it hits it for 15 minutes, 15 days, or 15 hours, you're going to pay that times $13. So under this scenario, and how EVs have a unique impact on this, is that during a particular time of the day, without people knowing, they all come home, say over a period of 2 hours, 25 EVs come home. One needs to charge for 20 minutes, and some of them need to charge for longer. But for that 20 minutes, all 25 EVs are plugged in. All of them by default will take 8 kilowatts of power. And what that'll do, without anybody really being aware, is the blue area won't be impacted that much, but the peak demand will be affected severely by this event. And again, this is 25 vehicles all being parked or plugged in at the same time. So this little event here, again, it just happened once with 25 EVs plugging in at the same time, will drive an extra 200 kilowatts of peak demand. And again, this is over above the energy that's actually being used to charge the vehicle. This is the impact on the peak demand of the building. So 200 kilowatts times $13 is $2,600. So as you can see, EV charging becomes very, very expensive in a strata property if it's always driving peak demand. And most buildings don't see a real incremental peak demand because they just don't have that many vehicles yet fully charging. And once they do, we see the impact of this financial strain on the accounts of strata corporations. So with an EMS installed on a system, basically the EMS knows what that lower red line is, and what it wants to do is prevent it from being breached by, doesn't matter how many vehicles are being charged. So under the same scenario, 25 electric vehicles all come home around the same time. EMS controller knows what that red line is. So basically what it does is it throttles the chargers down over that period of time. The charging sessions are extended a little longer, say into the evening or even overnight or whatever it is. But what happens is all the vehicles are still charged in plenty of time. This isn't a supercharging situation. It's designed around vehicles that are parked for generally 4 or more hours on a daily basis. But what this EMS just did here was basically save this building $2,600 in for 1 month of activity based on 25 electric vehicles. And again, this is only 25. You think you got 100 or 150 vehicles being charged in your building, it could become a very, very expensive challenge to deal with. The other impact and reality of an EMS is also to manage a building's limited capacity. So again, this peak demand is basically a way to financially make EV charging cheaper and not pay peak demand fees. But there's also the ability to manage capacity of a building. So under this scenario, let's say this building had enough, or to give everybody full power, it needed 100 kilowatts, but it only had 87 available on its system. So instead of 100, we basically set the EMS to 87 kilowatts. So now what we have in this scenario is the EMS knows the breaking point is maximum 87 kilowatts, but the ideal position is 50 kilowatts. But the 50 kilowatts is a variable based on dollars. So you want to save money, you keep the peak demand as low as possible. The 87 kilowatt is a fixed amount because that's your capacity. So what it's doing is that's a safety feature so that you won't over exceed your capacity in the building. So these two variables together, the EMS can basically have the operating range to say, okay, do I want to save money by driving down the peak demand? And it'll push that down as low as possible to save as much money as possible. But at the same time, if it does go up for whatever reason by council's decision or by need over time, it can go all the way up to 87 kilowatts and function properly. So again, the EMS is set to the total capacity, and it'll distribute any available energy to all the vehicles that are being charged at any given time. So again, we're looking at fixed, which is safety, and we're looking at variable, which is based on dollar and saving money. So the system does provide reliable home charging based on EVs that are parked for more than 4 hours a day. That's basically, we monitor a lot of buildings, hundreds of buildings and thousands of charging stations, and they work very, very well. Everybody, gets charged in plenty of time. And the EMS has proven to save strata properties a lot of money on peak demand charges, but also avoiding service upgrades if you don't have the capacity to do everything you want in your building. So rebate programs, just quick recap. There are rebates still available in BC, which is awesome given the climate out there, but the rebates are still available. EV Ready plan, you can have an EV Ready plan. Every strata is eligible for an EV Ready plan. They get $3,000 up to 75% of the cost of the plan covered by a rebate. $600 per park install up to a maximum of $120,000 per residential strata. And the EV charging stations up to $1,400 during an infrastructure upgrade to a maximum of $14,000 per year per strata. Now we're in the 4th year where every year on April 1st it resets and you can get another $14,000 for rebates. But just to note, there's up to $137,000 still available for every strata to make application. We as a company will make the application pre-approval for you on behalf of your strata. It does secure the rebates for 8 months, so they're locked up and you can make plans accordingly, sorry. And there is no cost or obligation. So if you decide not to go ahead with the plan or decide to leave it for another time, there's no problem to cancel or postpone the rebate application. So thank you very much for listening. I'll turn it back to you, Jenny.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the presentation, Bruce. If anybody has any questions, they can raise their hand. And then just you can unmute yourself. We also have a comment here in the chat. Dan says peak demand surcharge would only apply if the house meter is on the commercial tiered rate. Most strata house meters would be on a residential tiered rate, which does not have peak demand surcharge. Can you speak on this, Bruce?
Yeah, that's correct. So what'll happen is actually if you're on the non-tiered rate, whether you're on a small, a medium rate category, EV charging themselves will drive you into a peak demand situation. So, under 35 kilowatts, you don't pay any peak demand. So if you do the math on 8 kilowatts, you get 5 EV chargers, it'll bump you into a peak demand situation. And in the way it works is once you bumped out of the your tiered rate into a peak demand category, like small general service, you stay there. And then eventually, when you get more EV chargers, you might get bumped up from small residential to medium service. The good thing about that is your energy rate actually goes down. So as you move from tiered to small to general to large, your cost of energy goes down generally from around 14 cents down to 9 cents down to 6 cents in the large category. So it's kind of like the more you use, the less you pay. So you get a bulk rate, which is a good thing. But when you hit into the small general service, you get peak demand as well. So the messaging is use the power, use as much as you want, but just manage. Don't drive peak demand, because again, the utility needs to make provisions for the most power you ever need, not your average power. So peak demands are not good for anybody, and they're not grid friendly. So an EMS will level those peak demands out and make sure you're always paying as least as possible. But it's also the most grid friendly way to install and propagate the EV charging in residential properties.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Dan, I hope that answered your question. And we have another question from Ferber. Does it has to be one EMS per panel? I think that was they said it has to be one EVMS per panel.
Yeah, so in a strata property, there's one kind of master brain. So in a condo building, high-rise tower with an underground parkade, there's one master brain EMS that controls the entire network. There's no other EMS that are required. The only thing that would be required is the actual charging stations have to be compatible with that EMS controller, and vice versa. But there are no other EMS units needed in a condo property. When you get into townhomes, each of your meter centers, so if you have 4 meter centers serving 15 units each of the meter centers will need an EMS MC meter center controller. So those are individuals, and then each panel, so each townhome would require, and it's called an EMS home unit. It's a very small unit, kind of like a EMS Lite, the version that you put in a condo building, and it is designed for residential homes, private homes or townhomes, and it's designed just to go on that single panel. It can control the charger that's connected to it, and it'll monitor the panel's discharge, and it'll also feed information back to the master controller, the meter center controller, so that there's harmony on what's being used and when, and whether things need to be throttled down or not.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I see that Dan has his hand up. I guess let's go with Dan. Dan, can you unmute yourself and then you can ask your question?
Yeah, thanks. It's actually a new question, not related to the peak demand one, but I appreciate your response on that. The question I have is regarding the townhouse application. So I understand each unit has to have an EV-EMS for the townhouse, and then you need the EMS MC meter. Now, I guess the situation I've seen, or what I'm in with my townhouse complex, is you've got multiple clusters of buildings. Let's just say 4 or 3 clusters of buildings. Each cluster has 4 homes in it. So you can access the individual distribution panel is fine, but the 3 or 4 clusters of buildings all come off of that one transformer. So and that transformer is enclosed. It's a BC Hydro asset. There is no common electrical room that brings in that connection that then distributes out to all those clusters of buildings. So do you need that MC meter on that transformer, or can it just be sitting there as the central controller, but it doesn't necessarily need to be monitoring that combined service?
Yeah, it does vary a little bit by depending on how things, the distribution is. So, so would yours be a direct connected, like a utility connected? So you don't have any transformers on your property. What you're saying is they go from the townhomes to the utility?
No, we do have transformers on the property. There's I don't know, 3 or 4 probably transformers
Okay.
on the property, and
Yeah.
and from one transformer, it's going to multiple clusters, but there's no
Okay. Yeah.
common connection for all those clusters.
Yeah. So the monitored point would be the master, like the head of the clusters. And then as long as you've got home EMS in the townhomes that are part of that cluster, you don't need anything in between. As long as you're covering your master, or whatever the lead, the largest, kind of transformer that's on the site, as long as you're covering that, you're good. I think that was a question. You did break up a little bit there. We had a bad connection, so I missed a little bit of it. But yeah, based on the layout, basically, and the other thing too is that like a lot of townhomes have, owners that have already put chargers in, and they said, well, we didn't have any problem. We got a permit and put it in properly and everything like that. And we see a lot of that. So what happens typically in a townhome is, the third or fourth person or the fifth person suddenly can't get a permit, and they say, well, who's done a capacity study on the transformer or, on the overall site itself? And that's usually where, council's going, well, why is this our problem? That type of thing. So sounds like you're, well aware of this whole thing, but that kind of typically how it starts. First few people can have no problem, and then somebody says, hey, what about the transformers? So we have seen buildings where what they do is they start off allowing people to put chargers in because there's no real capacity issue. But they know at some point there's going to be a problem, and they got to go to the meter centered controlling things. So we try to be creative with, not, spend a lot of money up front if we don't have to, but it's really based on having a plan so that when you hit certain thresholds, what do you do? What you don't want to do is let the first 5 or 6 people kind of first movers get a charger, and then everybody else is out of luck until you do a $300,000-$400,000 upgrade. So we encourage kind of a planning to make sure that whatever the solution is kind of scalable for all owners in the future.
So we have a couple more questions here. So Jafar asks, load shedding device can use as EMS, if not, why?
Yeah, so load shedding, it really does again come down to capacity. If your townhomes have, plenty plenty and the upstream transformers have plenty capacity, you can use like load shifting or load um uh, you know uh breaker buddies and stuff like that. You can use different technology. It's really when you're adding, new especially heavy loads, like a EV charger is kind of similar to adding another, oven or stove. It's and running it for, 5 or 6 hours. So it's a heavy continuous load. So that's where the concern comes in. So again, it really depends on the property and how much capacity you have to deal with. Some of the newer places that have, 125 or 200 amp panels in the building, and everything's been sized accordingly, really don't have a problem. And panel management is kind of the 101. If you can manage power at the panel level and all owners can follow certain rules, you're not going to have a problem. The problem is enforcing it and making sure that nobody does go rogue and do something that's potentially, over exceeding the transformer without anybody knowing. So again, it's just planning site by site. We've done well over 1,000 capacity studies, and it's amazing how many unique properties are out there, and some are kind of good to go the way they are, and some need a few tweaks, and some need every trick in the book to kind of make it all work and talk to each other. So Unfortunately, it's not one size fits all, but there are a lot of products out there. There's 12 right now EMS kind of controllers that are approved by BC Hydro for rebates. They're all functional, but they all have their strengths and weaknesses. And that's where we kind of come in and say, well, here's how this one works great and this one doesn't, and that type of thing, and help find the right solution. We're agnostic when it comes to solutions, but we keenly see the value of energy management as things go on, and we move more stuff to the electrical grid and put more demand on the systems we have in place.
Wonderful. There's a question. I think this sort of answers two other questions, and I can add to the question. Can this be installed in such a way that each EVSE has its own meter for individual cost analysis and payment by use? And like, if the EVs are connected to the house meter, how are the kilowatt and hour charges allocated? And if all the charges, sorry, how's the charging of the vehicles managed? It charges all the cars at the same time, or as they arrive?
Yeah, so this would probably pertain to a condo building. So one thing about a townhome is that each individual townhome pays their own electricity bill. So the chargers will report usage, but generally most people use their cars, the car and their car app to see what the usage is or whatnot. But you're paying your own electricity bill, so technically nobody needs to track or monitor anything. There are EMS systems out there that'll report your usage, and you're eligible for carbon credits, for home charging. So that's one benefit, but billing is you're under your own. When you're talking about a condo building, basically, yeah, you're using strata paid power. So we encourage and strongly recommend systems that have built-in meters. So the system has an EMS. The EMS obviously does the load sharing, circuit sharing, load balancing, peak demand management, and if it needs capacity management, does all those things, but also does all the monitoring and metering. So the chargers have a Canada grade revenue meter in it, so you can actually bill for power. So each user just basically at the end of the month gets billed for the energy that they use automatically, by a third-party company. Also, if there's problems, they have problems with their charger or their car or how it's connected or anything like that, there's a service line that they can call instead of bothering council or building staff. So we do encourage those kind of systems because as people adopt vehicles, a lot of them don't know much about their electric vehicle, and if it doesn't work, they think it's the charger, and it's often software in the vehicle and things like that. So those are very helpful, but full cost recovery is a huge one. Having a very transparent set of rules and recovery costs. We recommend recovery costs. Again, council can decide what they want to set recovery costs are. We recommend a minimum of 15 cents a kilowatt hour, throughout Metro Vancouver and BC. That'll kind of guarantee, or at least you're covering your costs. But if you want to pay back, a certain amount of money or infrastructure investment, you can put it up at 22 or 28 cents a kilowatt hour until your CRF's replenished or whatever you want to do. So it is up to council, but again, we're here just to help inform and connect you with other councils that have gone through the same soul search and then come up with how they're going to run things. So we're that conduit for information.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and this is a bit of a specific question from Corinne, but I feel like homeowners are sort of moving towards this. So I am in a townhome with a detached garage. The meter is attached to the townhome. I have a solar PV system and a bi-directional meter. 240 plug is wired in the garage. How does this setup impact the EMS home installation? Where is it placed and still on the house meter?
Well, yeah, in a townhome, it sounds like, yeah, for a townhome situation, it sounds like you probably have ample capacity based on how everything's set up, and if you have an outlet already wired, it really depends whether that your entire system's been engineered for that 208 volt plug. If you have a outlet or a junction box that's kind of a free open 208 volt or 220 volt plug or outlet or receptacle, and it's been engineered into your system, then you should be able to use that without any problems. But we would have to look at the schematics of the design, and we could tell you or not. But if there wasn't capacity, if they put it in, but there's no upstream capacity for it, then a meter center meter might be required, and an EMS compatible charger in the townhome. But what it sounds like, if you have all that installed, it sounds like you're should be good to go. But I wouldn't be able to say that until we actually had a look at your site and the drawings for design. Sorry to skirt that one.
No worries. Wonderful. If there's no, I don't see any other questions. So yeah, I think we can end it there. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to see our presentation. I hope you've gained a lot of confidence and knowledge from this. And if you would like, we can send you the presentation at the end. We can email it to you. Yeah. Sanjay, is there anything else?
No, just thank you everyone for attending. I hope you found this a webinar informative, and we are there for any questions that need to be answered. Feel free to contact us. We'll be more than happy to help. And thank you, and have a wonderful evening.